I grew up together with Luis. We were childhood friends. His girlfriend minded that a lot. They often quarreled because of me, staging endless cycles of breaking up and making up, with her running away and him chasing after her. Until one party, when his girlfriend suddenly called me out in public. "Naomi, how about I introduce you to a boyfriend?" In the silence that followed, I lifted my eyes and glanced at Luis's best friend, Angelo. Then I smiled and shook my head. "No need. I already have a boyfriend." The next second, Luis's face turned dark, and he crushed the wine glass in his hand. Chapter 1. Luis and Miriam got back together again. When I heard the news, I felt no waves in my heart. Lillian excitedly messaged me with gossip. This time they broke up for 3 whole months before getting back together. That's a record. I heard Miriam left the country out of spite, and Luis chased her abroad just to coax her back. They've been dating for 2 years, broken up at least 5 times, and never get tired of it. I chuckled but didn't reply. I bet Luis will soon announce in the group chat that he's treating us to dinner again. "Are you going?" I sent a sticker politely declining. "No, I'm busy practicing piano. I've got a competition next month." "All right then, I'll still go meet that crazy couple. When I have new gossip, I'll share it with you." "Okay." After sending the last message, I went back to practicing. About half an hour later, I picked up my phone again and saw Lillian had sent me another message. She seemed to have thought long before asking, "But, do you know why they broke up this time?" "No idea." She replied almost instantly. "I heard it's because Miriam found out that Luis's phone lock screen password is your birthday." Chapter 2. On Friday, the long silent friends group chat suddenly became lively. As expected, it was Luis announcing that he and his girlfriend had reconciled, and he was inviting everyone out to dinner, same place as always. The group laughed and joked while responding, "We're used to it by now." "But still, congrats." Luis slowed down. "Huh? This time it took so long. When will I finally stop attending your endless reconciliation dinners?" I was about to type that I wouldn't go, but Miriam suddenly mentioned me directly in the group. "Miriam, Naomi, you must come, okay?" "Sorry, I'm a bit busy lately." "Miriam, oh come on. It's just a meal." "Miriam, I've always misunderstood your relationship with Luis before, and I'm sure that must have troubled you a lot." "Miriam, I just want to apologize to you face to face. Please give me this chance." And then the group chat fell into an awkward silence. No one else typed another word. Holding my phone, I suddenly felt very annoyed. A moment later, I replied, "All right." Chapter 3. By the time I arrived, the private room was already lively. The moment I pushed open the door, the air went silent for an instant. Sitting at the head of the table, Luis looked at me, his tightly furrowed brows easing slightly. "You're finally here?" he said, patting the empty seat beside him. "Come sit here." Miriam's expression shifted, but she still smiled and clung to Luis's arm, clearly trying to assert her claim. "Naomi, you're finally here. We've been waiting for you." "Sorry, traffic was a bit heavy on the way." While I spoke, Luis's gaze never left me. I pretended not to notice and turned away, walking toward Lillian, who was waving to me from a corner. Just as I sat down, Miriam approached with a glass of wine. "Naomi, I'm really glad you could come. I've always misunderstood your relationship with Luis, and that made me lose my temper with him over and over again, making a fool of both of us. I feel really embarrassed. I know it must have troubled you as well, so I want to apologize here. I hope you won't hold it against me." Standing beside me, Miriam looked down, her smile a little forced. "But it won't happen again. Luis has reassured me again and again, even though you grew up together. His kindness toward you is nothing more than an older brother taking care of a younger sister. And since you were always so clingy with him before, surely you only saw him as a brother too, right?" The once lively atmosphere quieted again. Everyone stared at their food or drinks, too awkward to butt in. Luis was still staring at me, as if waiting for my answer. Lillian rolled her eyes and was about to speak, but I reached out to stop her. Then I picked up my glass, stood up, and met Miriam's gaze at eye level. "It's good to clear the air. I accept your apology." I smiled faintly. "Luis is right, we're just ordinary neighbors. Don't misunderstand him anymore. It'll only hurt feelings." I raised my glass toward her. I wish you both lasting happiness together. No sooner had I spoken than, thud, Luis slammed his glass down on the table, face cold. A trace of irritation flickered between his brows. Yet he forced himself to speak calmly. You can't handle alcohol. Don't drink. Miriam's face changed instantly, her fingers gripping her glass so tightly they turned white. Because Luis wasn't talking to her. He was talking to me. Chapter 4. Luis and I met when we were 8 years old. Our families lived next door to each other. In elementary school, when I started learning violin, Luis would always shout from next door with his ears covered, Naomi, are you sawing wood over there? In middle school, Luis tutored me, knocking my head with his pen in frustration. Naomi, how dare you zone out during my lesson? In high school, when I fell during PE class, he carried me to the infirmary, so anxious he was nearly crying. Naomi, does it hurt? Later, when my parents died in a car accident, it was Luis who held my hand again and again, telling me, Naomi, don't be afraid, I'll always stay with you. We were the kind of childhood friends everyone envied, sharing almost every important moment in each other's lives, and I truly believed he meant it when he said he'd always stay with me. Until one day, a new student joined my violin class, and Luis started bringing up another girl's name again and again. He said, Naomi, don't you think that Miriam looks a bit like you? Like me? How so? She plays violin just as terribly as you did at the start. Then he said, Naomi, that Miriam is pretty interesting. Can you help me get her contact info? And then, he said, Naomi, I'm with Miriam now. Chapter 5. The private room was utterly silent. Among the people present, aside from Lillian, most were Luis's friends. I usually spent my time either in class or practicing violin, so I didn't interact with them much and had little rapport with them. Miriam, on the other hand, had been hanging out with them often ever since dating Luis, so her relationship with them was much closer. Luis's seemingly caring words left everyone exchanging glances with mixed expressions. Some were already casting disdainful looks at me, as if I were that stereotypical pretentious coquette childhood friend straight out of a melodramatic novel, scheming to steal the man by making life hard for the official girlfriend. I held back the furious Lillian who was about to flip the table, tilted my head back, downed the glass of wine in one gulp, and smiled politely yet distantly. It's just a bit of alcohol. Nothing I can't handle. Luis's face grew even colder. He strode forward and yanked the glass from my hand. In the process, he even shoved Miriam 2 steps back. Naomi, trying to act tough? You know perfectly well you break out in rashes when you drink. And you still drink? I couldn't suppress my irritation. It's none of your business. Luis was about to say more when the door to the private room was suddenly pushed open. Chapter 6. The newcomer wore a long black coat, his tall, well-built figure filling the doorway, almost blocking out the light from the corridor. His dark eyes carried a faint chill as he swept a glance across the room, radiating an invisible pressure. His gaze finally landed on my face, lingering for 2 seconds before moving away. The tense atmosphere seemed to crack open. Angelo? Luis sounded a bit surprised. Didn't you say you didn't have time to come today? Angelo strode into the room with long steps, sitting naturally in the seat directly across from me. Happened to drop by to pick someone up. Picked them up? Someone glanced at the doorway in confusion. I didn't see anyone. Angelo's lips curved faintly as his gaze brushed over me. Subtle and fleeting. No rush. Feeling guilty, I lowered my head until my chin nearly touched my chest. Chapter 7. Perfect. Now everyone's here. Miriam suddenly spoke up to ease the tension. She tugged Luis back into his seat and once again raised her glass. Since it's rare for all of us to gather today, we should toast together. Oh, I almost forgot. Naomi can't drink. She smiled apologetically, then widened her eyes as though something just occurred to her. Naomi, how about I introduce you to a boyfriend? Once you have a boyfriend, he can drink for you. That way, my Luis won't have to keep worrying about you. Her gaze locked on me, eyes brimming with thinly veiled resentment. Everyone caught the sarcasm hidden in her words. In the heavy silence, I lifted my eyes and glanced toward Luis's side, where Angelo was lounging lazily against his chair. No need. I smiled and shook my head. I already have a boyfriend. The moment I finished speaking, there was a sharp crack. Luis's face darkened, veins bulging on the back of his hand as he crushed the wine glass in his grip. Shards of glass cut into his skin, and blood instantly flowed across his palm. Naomi. Luis almost ground the words out through clenched teeth. What did you just say? Chapter 8. Miriam gasped and quickly asked the waiter to bring a first aid kit. Luis seemed completely oblivious to the pain. His eyes locked firmly on me. Say that again, word by word. I repeated. I said, I already have a boyfriend. How is that possible? Someone sneered. Yeah, everyone knows you secretly had a crush on Luis for years. Naomi. Miriam was just being kind. You don't need to make up a non-existent boyfriend just to refuse her. Or, are you only saying this to provoke Luis? The crowd's faces lit up with sudden realization. Luis's dark expression eased slightly. He let out a long sigh, his tone tinged with reproach. Naomi, don't say things just to spite me. I nearly rolled my eyes. Believe it or not, but by drinking that glass of wine today, it means all past misunderstandings are cleared. From now on, I don't want to hear another rumor about you two breaking up because of me. If you still want to stay friends, then stop dragging me unwillingly into your love drama. With that, I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. At the threshold, I suddenly paused, turned back. Angelo, would you mind giving me a ride? Gasps rippled across the room, eyes wide in disbelief. Luis spun around sharply. Naomi, who did you just call? The man sitting beside him arched his brows with a faint smile, slowly rising to his feet and walking toward me. Not at all. Luis tried to chase after me, but Miriam held him back. His fists clenched tighter, shards of glass cutting deeper into his palm. His voice trembled slightly. Naomi, don't you dare leave. I didn't look at him. I turned and walked out of the private room. Chapter 9. The car was a little warm. I sat in the passenger seat with my head lowered, not knowing what to say. My phone kept buzzing. It was Luis, calling again and again. Annoyed by the noise, I simply put it on silent. Suddenly, Angelo leaned closer, his long arm reaching across to pull the seatbelt over me and buckle it. Yet when he finished, he didn't immediately pull back. He was very close, a faint cedar scent brushing past my nose. I could clearly feel his gaze settle on my neck, then move to my arm, as though checking me. After a pause, his deep, cool voice asked, magnetic and cold, do you feel uncomfortable? I instantly understood what he meant and shook my head. No, it was just 2 small sips of wine, not enough to cause rashes. He nodded, withdrew, and started the car. The cool night breeze drifted in through the window, sweeping away the heat lingering on my face. Chapter 10. The first time I heard the name Angelo, I assumed he must be just like his name, bold and passionate. But after the few times we crossed paths, I realized he was nothing like that. He was quiet, cold, wrapped in a kind of aloofness that kept people at a distance. At every gathering, he either didn't show up at all or only made a brief appearance before leaving. Luis said he was incredibly gifted, born with a silver spoon, mastering everything from an early age, sweeping up awards both at home and abroad. So I never understood how such an untouchable flower on the high mountain ended up being close brothers with Luis. From high school to university, Angelo and I barely interacted. Yet, something unexpected happened last month. Chapter 11. At the Violin Club's group dinner, I mistook fruit wine for juice and drank an entire bottle. When the other members saw the large red rashes spreading over my skin, they were terrified and tried to rush me to the hospital. Just as we stepped out of the restaurant, we ran straight into Angelo. He scooped me up and carried me into his car, flooring the accelerator all the way. Actually, my alcohol rash only looked serious. It wasn't life-threatening. What really was life-threatening was that, in my drunken haze, I suddenly lost control in the car and bit Angelo on the neck 3 times. Hard. After biting him, I even smacked my lips and said he tasted pretty good. And of all things, when I sobered up, that part remained crystal clear in my memory. I was practically ready to get down on my knees and beg Angelo for forgiveness, swearing I'd find a way to make it up to him. Angelo's eyes held a faint trace of amusement, the red teeth marks still visible on his neck. How will you make it up to me? My brain froze. I didn't know if I should take responsibility for him or let him bite me 3 times too. Can I think about it first? You can. Chapter 12. After that day, I kept running into Angelo everywhere. At the library, the sports field, the cafeteria, even when I was practicing violin. I'd see him pass by outside the window. I suspected he was doing it on purpose, until the 10th time he came over to share my table at lunch. I finally couldn't hold back. Angelo, are you in a hurry? I still haven't decided yet. He only gave a quiet picked out my favorite sweet and sour ribs and put them into my bowl. Then he answered softly, I'm not rushing you. Chapter 13. By the time my thoughts returned, the car had already reached my apartment building. Angelo followed behind me, walking me all the way to my door. Inside, I was struggling with myself as I slowly took out my keys to unlock the door. Go to bed early. If you feel unwell, call me immediately. Okay. He looked at me for a moment, then said, close the door. I gripped the doorknob tightly and looked up at him, as if making a decision. Angelo. What I said just now about having a boyfriend, it was a lie. I know. But it can become true. Angelo blinked, then let out a quiet laugh, the sharpness in his eyes softening. He asked knowingly, how so? I want to take responsibility for you. Will you be my boyfriend? My palms were sweating. Before he could reply, I quickly added, you don't have to answer right away. You can think about it. I can wait. Goodbye. Good night. With that, I slammed the door shut with a bang. My heart felt like it was about to leap out of my chest. Leaning against the door, I exhaled a long breath. I hadn't even turned on the lights yet. The room was still dark. Suddenly, my phone screen lit up. I picked it up and saw it was a call from Angelo. Wasn't he just outside the door? Though puzzled, I still pressed accept. His voice was hoarse, as though holding something back. Open the door, he said softly. I want to kiss you. Right now. Chapter 14. I was almost suffocating. The moment I opened the door, Angelo nearly forced his way inside, shutting it behind him. The room was pitch black. His arms slid around my waist, his tall frame pressing down, and then came the overwhelming flood of kisses. My mind was a mess. I couldn't even piece together how things had escalated to this point. Angelo kissed fiercely, like a long-restrained desire had finally burst free, unstoppable and consuming. I pressed my hands against his shoulders, the air around me growing thinner, making it hard to breathe. Angelo, I was really about to suffocate. Then suddenly, he grabbed the back of my head and bit hard on my lips. I gasped in pain, and only then did he stop. His lips pulled away, but his arms still circled my waist, locking me tightly in his embrace. Angelo didn't seem much better off himself. In the quiet darkness, our foreheads leaned together as we panted heavily, breaths tangling. We stayed like that for a while. I felt Angelo's gaze roaming my face, and then he lifted his hand, the warmth of his fingertips brushing over my lips, gently tracing the spot he had just bitten. Does it hurt? It did hurt a little, but I shook my head. It's fine. The air between us grew subtle. Angelo, isn't this a bit too fast for us? He fell silent for a moment before replying with a faint mem. It is. A little. Then, according to my expectations, he should have immediately understood my meaning. Then let go of me. We'd say goodbye, go home, and each reflect on our actions, then take things step by step like a normal couple. But instead, Angelo only pulled me tighter, his low voice asking, have you rested enough? Huh? He lowered his head, the cool cedar scent enveloping me, his voice still husky with lingering desire. Because I'm going to continue. And then his lips came down on mine again. At least he was polite enough to give notice first. But this time, his kiss was tender. Gentle pecks landed one after another on my cheek, at the corner of my lips. The aggression from before was gone, replaced by cautious, lingering affection. One arm held my waist, the other cradled my face, the tender kisses slowly deepening into a tangle of lips and teeth. My heart raced wildly. I closed my eyes, limbs weakening, losing control. I clung to his shoulders, letting the unfamiliar tide sweep away my senses. My phone lit up and dimmed, again and again, Luis's calls and messages never stopped. Angelo nibbled lightly at my tongue, then suddenly lifted me into his arms, carrying me under the moonlight toward the living room sofa. In that long kiss, I suddenly realized, in certain ways, Angelo truly lived up to his name, passionate to the point of excess, as if he never knew fatigue. But surprisingly, I didn't dislike it. Angelo sank into the sofa, his large hands steadying my back, guiding me to straddle his lap. My lips were numb, and the belt at his waist dug sharply into my thighs. I braced both hands against his shoulders, using the pause between breaths to pull myself back a little. Angelo, that's enough. Angelo froze for a second, as if realizing he had indeed gone too far. Sorry. His voice was hoarse. I lost control, seeing me remain silent. Angelo seemed a little panicked, his arms tightening around me. In the darkness, I couldn't see his expression clearly, only felt his voice tinged with unease and a faint pleading. Don't hate me. I was a little startled. I had never imagined that someone like Angelo, always like a favored child of heaven, could show such a humble side. I don't hate you. My cheeks burned. I'm just a bit tired. Angelo seemed to smile faintly. He rested his forehead lightly against my neck, his shallow breaths brushing against my collarbone as he spoke. What are you planning for tomorrow? I thought for a moment. Practice violin in the morning, write my paper in the afternoon. Then, can we meet? Yes. How about having a meal together? Lunch? All 3 meals. I chuckled. Okay. The next day, as soon as I arrived outside the practice room, I found Luis sitting at the door. He was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, looking a little haggard, dark circles heavy under his eyes as if he hadn't slept all night. When he saw me, he sprang to his feet. Naomi, I called you all night. Why didn't you pick up? I sidestepped, avoiding the hand he reached out to grab me with. Sorry, I didn't look at my phone last night. Luis's eyes were bloodshot, his gaze nearly splitting apart. Didn't look at your phone? Then what were you doing? Why did you ask Angelo to take you home last night? How well do you know him? And when did you move? Why did the neighbors say you'd already moved out when I went to your place looking for you? His rapid-fire questions were starting to irritate me. What does any of that have to do with you? Nothing to do with me? Luis gave a cold laugh. Naomi, you're doing all this just to provoke me, aren't you? I stared blankly. Did you take the wrong medicine? Naomi, after all these years, who could know you better than I do? Luis looked certain of himself. I know Miriam embarrassed you in public yesterday, and you were angry. I apologize to you on her behalf. From now on, I won't let her appear in front of you again. He looked a bit weary, sighing helplessly. But you have to promise me to stay away from Angelo from now on, and don't ignore my calls, or use other men to get back at me. I was speechless. Chapter 15. It turns out, when a person is truly speechless, they really just want to laugh. Luis, what exactly do you take me for? A neighbor? A friend? Or just that little tail who used to follow you everywhere in the past? I looked at him coldly. What right do you have to control me? Naomi, we grew up together. All these years, haven't I looked after enough of your affairs? Yes, we did grow up together, but that's all it is, isn't it? For a moment, Luis's expression froze. I took a step back, putting distance between us. Luis, admit it, we've both changed. You have your choices, and I have my own life. From now on, stop being so two-faced, and stop interfering in my life. Luis's hands clenched tightly. His palms, crudely wrapped in gauze from the glass cuts, were already seeping blood. No, his gaze was obsessive. Nothing has changed. I sighed lightly, unwilling to keep tangling with him. I moved because the lease was up. As for my new address, I don't see why I need to tell you. And about Angelo, I paused for a second. I have even less reason to stay away from him. Because he's my boyfriend. Luis's body jolted violently. What did you say? What did you say? 2 voices rang out at once. Lillian suddenly appeared out of nowhere, hooking an arm around my shoulders. Well, Naomi! Dating and hiding it from me? I gave an embarrassed smile and pulled her toward the practice room. I'll explain everything later. But Luis suddenly grabbed my wrist. his grip so strong it felt like he might crush the bone. HSS, let go. Luis acted as though he hadn't heard, his eyes reddening, shock mixed with suppressed fury. Naomi, are you serious? Before I could answer, Lillian slapped his hand away. She pulled me to the side and, without a shred of politeness, said straight to Luis, enough. Young Master Luis, you already have a girlfriend, so why are you still clinging to Naomi? You stormed off yesterday without a word and disappeared the whole night. Your girlfriend sat at the table crying for hours, none of us could even comfort her. If you don't go coax her soon, be careful or Miriam will break up with you again. With that, Lillian rolled her eyes and dragged me into the practice room without looking back. Chapter 16. I explained the whole story to Lillian. After listening, she first let out a long sigh of relief. Then I can rest assured. You being single until now. I honestly thought it was because you couldn't get over Luis. That scumbag. I shook my head, smiling in relief. I let him go a long time ago. Lillian added. No wonder you suddenly asked Angelo to take you home last night. That really shocked everyone. Was it that exaggerated? I asked, puzzled. After all, we're all friends. It's not strange for someone to give me a ride, right? Maybe not if it were anyone else. But this is Angelo. In our circle, yes. Everyone's family background is decent. But compared to Angelo, it's like a drop in the ocean. Lillian clicked her tongue. If this were a novel, with his kind of background, we'd all have to call him the crown prince of the capital. I could never understand why someone so far out of reach would lower himself to join our circle. But now, I think I'm starting to get it. Her eyes landed on me as she spoke. I tugged the corner of my lips. Your imagination is running too wild. Lillian looked unconvinced. Don't believe me? Let me reason it out for you. In the past, he never joined any of our gatherings, but every time you showed up, he did. He's the kind of person who won't even attend his own graduation. Yet he has never missed a single one of your competitions or performances. Even the best of friends wouldn't be able to do that, right? Lillian's eyes widened, goosebumps running over her skin. It's something you don't notice at first, but once you think about it, it's shocking. For us, seeing him even once is rare. But you bump into him every other day. And those anonymous birthday gifts you get every year, the set of jewelry worth 7 figures the year before. And last year, a custom violin engraved with your name. You couldn't figure out who sent them, so you've been too scared to even touch them, just leaving them at home. But now that I think about it, who else could be that extravagant? If not Angelo? With a slap of her palm, Lillian declared, Angelo's probably been secretly longing for you for years. I was stunned into silence for a long time. Couldn't it be just a coincidence? There's no such thing as so many coincidences. I suddenly recalled Angelo's unrestrained kiss from last night, and couldn't help but feel a little shaken inside. But he doesn't seem like the type to have a secret crush. That's true, Lillian nodded, then added. His aura actually feels more like the kind of guy who would lock up the person he loves and drown them in obsessive love day and night. Stop reading so many smutty novels. Chapter 17. Ever since realizing Angelo might secretly like me, these past few days I couldn't stop myself from paying attention to his every move. He seemed to know everything about me, that I liked sunflowers, hated onions and garlic, was allergic to peanuts, things I had never shared with anyone else. He knew them all by heart. Angelo was always gentlemanly and considerate. Yet when we were alone, he often clung to my hand, refusing to let go, or suddenly leaned in to kiss my cheek while I was talking. It was like a little dog begging its owner for pats. His needy, uneasy expression completely at odds with his noble, untouchable aura. Every time I finished practicing violin and turned around, I'd always see Angelo. He would be standing there, holding a bouquet of radiant sunflowers, leaning in the half-light and half-shadow. The breeze stirred, and in his gaze swirled emotions I couldn't quite understand. Like suppressed madness, like restrained possessiveness. He smiled faintly at me, as if saying, I've been waiting for you. For a long, long time. Chapter 18. Lillian said Luis had been spending all his time at the bar lately. Whenever he got drunk, he would keep calling me. On the other end of the line, he always seemed lost in memories, rambling on about the past. He talked about the garden full of blooming roses we used to pass on our way home from school. He talked about how we used our pocket money to buy canned food for the stray cat at the school gate. He talked about the time when my violin teacher scolded me to tears. And how he, trying to defend me, secretly put chili peppers into the teacher's thermos. I was dozing off as I listened. Angelo pulled me into his arms, gently patting my back while taking over the phone. "She's asleep. Let me keep you company instead." Luis hung up. Then he started persistently sending me messages. He asked me why I was with Angelo. Said I didn't really understand him. Even told me to break up with him. I finally lost patience and blocked all his contacts. Things stayed quiet for a few days, until Aunt Karen reached out to me. Aunt Karen is Luis's mother. Ever since my parents passed away in a car accident, Aunt Karen had treated me very well, almost as if I were her own daughter. Over the phone, she said Luis hadn't been in a good mood lately and asked if he had quarreled with his girlfriend. I didn't know how to answer, so I just said, "Maybe." Aunt Karen sounded wistful. She chatted with me a little about daily life. And in the end, she asked me to come home for dinner over the weekend. After a moment of thought, I said yes. Chapter 19. When I went back that day, Luis was there too. He was wearing the white shirt I had given him for his high school graduation, looking haggard. The moment the door opened and he saw me, a flicker of light and hope appeared in his eyes. "You're back." I nodded slightly and stepped inside. Aunt Karen pulled me close, looked me over, said I'd lost weight, and told me she had asked the chef to make my favorite sweet and sour ribs. The aroma of food drifted from the kitchen, and a lively soap opera played on the TV. Luis sat on one side of the sofa, watching me and Aunt Karen chat with a look of quiet joy. For a brief moment, it was as if he had gone back to our high school days, to some ordinary yet happy evening. After dinner, Aunt Karen went to the study to deal with work. Luis stopped me, his voice almost pleading, "Naomi, let's talk." Chapter 20. When did you and Angelo get together? The night of the dinner party. A flicker of surprise flashed across Luis's face. I hurried to stop him. "Don't overthink it. I'm really not with him just to spite you." Luis's expression turned lifeless again. "You like him?" I thought of Angelo clinging to me and refusing to let go when I was leaving earlier, and couldn't help but curve my lips. Luis fell silent for a moment, then suddenly gave a self-mocking smile. "Do you even know him?" "Luis." I looked at him calmly. "I know you. But we didn't end up together either. Did we?" Luis choked on his words, clenched his hands tightly, and turned his head away from me. "Believe it or not, Angelo already has someone he likes. I've seen it. His phone wallpaper is the back view of a girl. He's used that photo for many years." I listened, then nodded. Oh. Luis turned back, shocked. "Naomi, have you really gotten this indifferent? This is between Angelo and me. It has nothing to do with you." I paused. "Luis, let me tell you one last time, everything in the past is over. I hope you can live your own life well, and stop interfering with mine. That way, we can still be friends." "Friends?" Luis's eyes reddened. "Naomi, who wants to be friends with you?" I nodded, showing I understood. "Fine, then we'll be strangers." The wind suddenly picked up all around us, and Luis's face went pale. I calmly added, "From now on, there will be no ties between us anymore." In the distance, muffled thunder rolled, and a downpour poured from the sky. "It's raining," I said softly. "Luis, I'm going home." Chapter 21. I said goodbye to Aunt Karen, but as I opened the door I saw a familiar figure. Angelo was leaning against the wall, the warm yellow light stretching his shadow long. He turned at the sound, and when he saw me, the tension in his brows and eyes instantly softened. "What are you doing here?" I ran over, took his hand, and touched it. It was a bit cold. Angelo's gaze lingered on the hand I held, and the corners of his lips lifted slightly. "It's raining." He held my hand firmly. "I came to take you home." Angelo's car was parked outside the villa. He held an umbrella over us, shielding me completely from the wind and rain. Just as he opened the car door, Luis suddenly ran out. "Naomi, don't go." Rain had soaked his hair and shirt, making him look pitiful and disheveled. Luis's back was hunched, his expression twisted with pain and desperation. I regret it. He stared straight at me. Naomi, I regret it. Could you not leave? Luis stepped closer, pulling a folded envelope from his pocket. A love letter. This is a love letter you wrote to me. You did like me, didn't you? He held the envelope out to me, his eyes full of hope, as if he had grabbed onto a lifeline. Naomi, we said we'd always stay by each other's side. Have you forgotten? Chapter 22. That love letter was something I wrote at the start of our senior year in high school. I'd originally planned to give it to Luis by hand after the college entrance exams. But after the exams, Luis told me he was already with Miriam. I pressed that letter, along with my girlish feelings, to the very bottom of my drawer. It had been so long since then that I had forgotten it even existed. I never expected Luis to dig it out. The paper had already turned yellow with age, and now rain had soaked it so badly it was nearly falling apart. I reached out and took the letter. The hand circling my waist tightened instantly. Angelo's eyes went cold as he stared at Luis indifferently. I leaned closer to him, trying to soothe his unease. So Luis, what is it you're regretting? You knew perfectly well that I once liked you, yet you still chose to be with someone else. You're the one who broke the promise first, aren't you? Luis hung his head, rain dripping from his hair in strings. I'm sorry. His voice trembled. Naomi, I'm sorry. I was just afraid. Luis didn't grow up in a happy home. His mother was a businesswoman. His father, an artist. When they fell in love, it was fiery and intense. But once the passion cooled, the perfect match became a resentful couple. You despise my smell of money. I despise your lofty pride. After countless shouting matches, Luis's father left the country in a fit of anger and never returned. So Luis was afraid that even the most beautiful love of youth would end up turned to ashes in the flames of life. Luis thought, then let's just be friends. At least, Naomi as a friend would never leave him. But only now did he realize how terribly wrong he'd been. I'm sorry. Luis's voice broke. Naomi, forgive me, will you? I gently tugged the letter in my hand, ripping it into two halves. I smiled and tossed it into the trash can nearby. No one stays in the same place forever. Luis, I don't like you anymore. I said this, then took Angelo's hand and turned to get into the car. Luis stared blankly, his whole body losing strength as he half knelt down, breaking completely in the pouring rain. For many years afterward, Luis remained trapped in that torrential night, regretting alone. Chapter 23. On the way home, Angelo didn't say a word. I couldn't help feeling a little guilty. When we arrived home, I was still weighing my words to speak, and had just called his name when Angelo suddenly turned around and hugged me. His arms circled my waist tighter and tighter, as if afraid I might run away. Then he slowly lowered his head, burying his face against my neck. His hot breath tickled my ear. I raised a hand, patting the back of his head, and asked, Angelo, are you angry? Angelo started nibbling at my neck, light bites one after another. I'm not angry. His voice was muffled. Then are you scared? Angelo froze, then lifted his head to meet my eyes. I saw the darkness and restraint in his gaze. A moment later, he leaned in and kissed me, not allowing any refusal. He kissed me fiercely, full of obvious urgency and unease. At last, he let me go, gasping for breath, his forehead resting against mine. He gave a quiet I'm scared. I could barely breathe from his kiss. Scared I'll soften and go back? Angelo didn't speak, which was as good as admitting it. I smiled. Do you really have so little confidence in me? He shook his head, his tone almost aggrieved. I have no confidence in myself. Look at him, brows lowered like that, like a wounded puppy. My heart turned to mush. I cupped his face in my hands and planted 2 loud kisses on him. How about now? Angelo's brows lifted slightly, his mood instantly brightening, his eyes glinting with a strange light. You're coaxing me? I'm coaxing the puppy. The corners of his lips quirked up. But the puppy thinks it's still not enough. What would be enough then? His gaze turned intense. He pulled me closer again, the desire in his eyes growing darker. Say you like me. Angelo lowered his head, brushing gentle kisses along my lips. Baby, say you like me. I tilted my head up, looked into his eyes. and said one word at a time, Angelo. I like you. The tail end of my voice drowned in his burning, deep kiss. Chapter 24. We stumbled from the doorway to the sofa. In the midst of kissing, lost in the moment, a sudden thought flashed through my mind. I pushed Angelo away and reached out my hand to him. Give me your phone. Angelo naturally took out his phone and placed it in my palm. His deep gaze, however, stayed fixed on my flushed lips, clearly still unsatisfied. The password's your birthday, he said, leaning in to kiss me again. I unlocked the phone. The next second, I saw that the wallpaper was a photo of me. To be exact, it was a photo of me from junior year of high school. That day, I'd won the gold medal in a violin competition for the first time in my life. It was only a small interschool competition, but to me that honor was immeasurable. Judging from the angle, the picture looked like a candid shot, only capturing my back. I was standing on the podium, holding flowers in one hand and a trophy in the other. Under the lights above, in the camera, I looked like I was glowing. I stared blankly at the phone until my eyes started to sting. Angelo, I asked, do you know why I like sunflowers? Angelo raised his hand, his fingertips gently caressing my cheek. Because the piece you performed the day you won your first violin gold medal was Sunflower. Angelo, have you liked me for a long time? A long time, I stubbornly pressed. Since when? Probably since. I heard someone in the abandoned equipment room behind the school, playing the violin like sawing wood. Abandoned equipment room? It was like a jolt of realization. Chapter 25. I'd never had much talent. In middle school, my violin playing was still unbearable to hear. Luis would complain endlessly in front of me every day, begging me to spare his ears. At that age, my pride was strong. In a fit of anger, I threw the violin aside, saying I'd never play again. But at midnight, I secretly took it back and went to find a secluded place to practice in secret. That place was the abandoned equipment room behind the school, so it hadn't been a secret base only I knew about. Thinking of this, my lips trembled and tears spilled from my eyes. Angelo panicked, fumbling to wipe my tears. What's wrong? I choked up. You saw me at my most embarrassing. What was embarrassing about it? Angelo cupped my face and kissed it again and again. That time you couldn't get one note right, crying while you played from frustration. You have no idea how cute that was. I explained. I was just holding my breath back then, thinking I'd quietly work hard and then amaze everyone. Angelo's gaze was tender. I was already completely amazed by you long ago. Baby. My cheeks burned. I awkwardly changed the subject. You became friends with Luis because of me? I wanted to be closer to you. And all those anonymous gifts I got on my birthdays before, they were from you too? Angelo nodded. Why didn't you tell me? If I told you, I was afraid you wouldn't accept them. My heart softened, and I let out a long sigh. Angelo, what would you have done if you'd missed me? Angelo chuckled softly and hugged me tight. It's a good thing I didn't miss you. Really good. Chapter 26. Lillian shared more gossip with me. She said Luis and Miriam had broken up again. This time it's for real. Luis was the one who ended it. Miriam begged him to stay, but Luis directly blocked and deleted her. So ruthless, just a while ago he was still clinging to her overseas. After a while, she asked, has Luis tried to contact you again? He must regret it, right? Serves him right. During the following week, Miriam came to see me a few times, mainly to ask where Luis was. I told her I didn't know. She looked a little haggard. When she was leaving, she gave me a sarcastic smile. Luis broke up with me. He said the only reason he chased me in the first place was because I was like you. Naomi, now that you've beaten me, are you happy? I rolled my eyes. The only thing I care about winning or losing is violin competitions. As for you, you're not even qualified to be on my radar. I later complained about this to Angelo. After listening, he only chuckled and said, don't worry, she won't show up in front of you again. Sure enough, just a few days after he said that, Miriam took a leave of absence from school. Later, Aunt Karen told me Luis was preparing to go abroad and asked if I could see him one last time. I refused. That night, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. Just a few short words. I will wait for you. At the time, I was curled up in Angelo's arms watching a horror movie. He picked up the phone, glanced at it, and replied, We'll send you a wedding invitation. Chapter 27. The day Luis left the country. I happened to be competing in the national violin competition. When the rankings were announced, the spotlight fell on me, and everyone cheered for me. In the shifting crowd, I caught sight of a lonely figure leaving through the exit. It looked like Luis, but I had no time to care, because in that moment, I was going to embrace the love of my life. Story 2. When Alex left me alone at the wedding, I knew he had been reborn too. He said, I can't lie to myself anymore. This time, I don't want to miss out on her again. In the previous life, my sister came to the wedding in her gown to take him away, and Alex refused. My sister was heartbroken, left the country to become a war correspondent, and eventually died on the job. On the same day, Alex took his life for her, driving his car into a river. The dashcam on the car recorded his final moments, and I learned of the repressed and desperate love he'd had for my sister all those years. Now, reborn, I watched Alex and my sister leave, and I couldn't help but laugh coldly. What Alex didn't know was that my sister had always loved taking things from me. The more I liked something, the more she wanted it. If I didn't want it, she would lose interest. Chapter 1. At my wedding with Alex, the officiant asked Alex, at this moment, what is the one thing you want to say to the bride? Alex took the microphone, his voice excited and loud, Selena. I love you. The audience was in an uproar, because I wasn't Selena. Selena was my sister. She was, at that moment, cautiously walking into the wedding venue in a bridal gown, intending to take Alex away, except that in the previous life, Alex had refused her. He said he only loved me. The rejected Selena was so devastated that she left the country to become a war correspondent, and died on the job. Upon hearing the news, Alex took his own life the same day, driving himself and his car into a river. The dash cam recorded his final moments. I regret it so much. Why did I marry Nicole out of obligation? Why didn't I leave with Selena back then? Why did I let her go abroad, now that she's dead? What's the point of me living? I'm sorry. Selena, I'm sorry. I'm coming to join you now. From now on, neither of us will be alone. Alex's voice was full of despair, regret, and agony. Every word felt like a knife, repeatedly stabbing my heart. The saddest part was that, at that time, I was already 8 months pregnant. A week after Alex's death, the resurrected Selena openly appeared before me. I didn't die. I just told Alex a little lie. I never thought he would take it seriously. Turns out he loved me that much. She stood before me, in the posture of a victor, watching me as if it were a joke. Since childhood, she loved to take things from me. She was my father's illegitimate daughter. When she was 10, her mother abandoned her, and my father had no choice but to bring her home. After coming home, she put on a harmless facade. But behind the scenes, she couldn't stand me being better than her in any way. Whatever I had, she would go to any lengths to obtain. For instance, my grandparents' love, my father's love, and even my mother's love. And, for instance, the clothes, dresses, jewelry, and makeup I liked, whatever I had. She made sure she had it too. Honestly, I knew she would try to take my boyfriend, but I didn't think she would succeed. Chapter 2. Alex. Is it true? Selena looked at Alex with immense joy, her eyes brimming with tears of happiness. I should be brave for us this one time, Alex said resolutely. He walked down, leaving me alone on the stage. He stood before Selena, gently wiping her tears. Turns out, Alex could be this tender to others as well. I met Alex during our freshman year. He was a poor student. His parents had passed away, and the only family he had was his elderly grandmother, who collected recyclables to support his education. Out of kindness, I sponsored him. I was also kind enough to accompany him to the hospital when his grandmother fell ill, and I helped pay for the medical expenses. In the previous life, Alex pursued me, He said I made him feel the sunlight and warmth of this world. He said he knew he wasn't worthy of pursuing me, but he feared that years later, I would belong to someone else. So he couldn't take the risk. But he made a promise to me. He said he would work hard to give me a better life. And if he ever betrayed me in this lifetime, he would cut off his own legs. With my support and encouragement, Alex rose to success. And shortly after graduation, he became a rising star in his field. He kept his promise, marrying me at the peak of his career. But after we got married, I no longer felt his passion for me. And now, the look Alex gave Selena was burning with desire. His eyes filled with the joy of regaining something precious. What about my sister? Selena said hesitantly. She looked at me. No one noticed the trace of triumph hidden in her eyes. I would never forget what she said in my ear before she pushed me down the stairs, leading to my death. All I did was pretend to fall in front of Alex, then accidentally let him see the bruises I made myself. He felt sorry for me. He thought I was being abused at home. Did you think he kept his distance from me all these years because he hated me? No, it was because he was afraid he couldn't control his desire for me. Do you know how much he struggled? But I really didn't expect that Alex would marry you in the end just out of responsibility. If I couldn't take what was yours, then let him die. Neither of us should have him. Now that you know the truth, sister, you should die too. Only I can be the princess. I fell from the tall staircase, and with it, both my life and that of my unborn child ended. When I opened my eyes again, it was the day of the wedding. Turns out Alex had been reborn too. Chapter 3. Alex looked back at me, his eyes showing no hesitation or doubt. I can't lie to myself anymore. This time, I don't want to miss out on her again. After saying that, he didn't give me a chance to speak at all, taking Selena by the hand and leaving without looking back. I watched Alex's figure walking away for love, and a cold smile appeared at the corners of my lips. He didn't know that Selena always loved taking my things. The more I liked something, the more she wanted it. If I didn't want it, she lost interest. That grand wedding, naturally, came to an abrupt end. My broken engagement to Alex became a joke to others. I was the one being ridiculed. No one blamed Selena for being the other woman. I knew Alex had given word to the people in his circles. He's now a rising star in the industry, and no one dares to cross him. I didn't bother to clear my name. After all, Alex's karma would come soon enough. Right now, I am more focused on getting my own career off the ground. After getting together with Alex, my focus had been on him, managing his company, entertaining for him, and when his career stabilized, I willingly returned to being a homemaker. I thought he was worth it. What a fool I had been. A month after Alex and Selena disappeared, they returned home. Selena was kneeling on the ground, crying her heart out. It was as if she was the one being wronged, even though she was the one who had taken someone else's husband. When I got home, I saw my parents' faces full of helplessness. No matter what, my parents couldn't help but be angry at Selena for doing something so outrageous at my wedding. But now, because of Selena's tearful apologies, their anger seemed to soften. The moment Selena saw me, she broke down even more. She knelt and crawled over to me. Sister, you can punish me however you want. Just please don't blame Alex. It's all my fault. Anything? I confirmed. Anything, Selena said firmly. In the previous life, I had also indulged Selena, not only because she could pretend well, but I also thought that if she liked what I liked, it was because she lacked confidence, always wanting to imitate me. Of course, the most important thing was that I never thought it was worth arguing with her. Since childhood, the confidence my family gave me made me never think that Selena could ever rise above me. I still underestimated her. So at this moment, I bent down and slapped Selena hard across the face. The sound of the slap was loud, and Selena was stunned. Before she could react, Alex roughly pushed me away, almost making me fall. He protected Selena in his arms. Nicole, the issue between us has nothing to do with Selena. You can take it out on me. Fine. I didn't hesitate and stepped forward, slapping Alex right across the face. For scumbags and homewreckers, I'd slap them one by one, pair by pair. Chapter 4. Alex was fuming after I slapped him. He probably never expected that I Always so gentle. Could be this rough. My parents were stunned too. A month after being left at the altar, I hadn't shown any signs of emotional collapse at home. Instead, I focused on bettering myself. They knew I had always avoided getting into conflicts with my sister, so they assumed I was turning my grief into motivation, that I had moved on from it all. Moved on? How could I? Good and evil will receive their due, it's just a matter of time. Nicole, we came back this time to sincerely apologize to you, Alex said angrily, as if he had every right to do so. It was as if he thought that just because he admitted fault, I should be grateful and forgive him. I laughed in exasperation. What a shameless person. Just because you apologize, I have to accept it? I asked Alex. So if I killed your entire family and said sorry, does that make it okay? So why do we need police, laws, morals, or values in this world? My sarcasm left Alex feeling awkward. He probably never expected me to be so unyielding, refusing to give him any face. In the past, I always cautiously protected his pride. I knew he felt insecure about his background, so whether in public or in private, I always ensured his male ego was intact. He got used to enjoying that, so now my uncharacteristic behavior caught him off guard, leaving him speechless. Selena spoke up at this point. Sister, I know you love Alex very much, so it's hard for you to accept us being together. But love can't be one-sided. We genuinely love each other. Please let us be together. If I say I won't, will you break up? I asked Selena with a smile. You were never this unreasonable. Alex doesn't love you. You two wouldn't be happy together. You should actually be grateful that you and Alex didn't get married. That you didn't create a true tragedy between you, Selena said, sounding righteous. I had to admit, Selena was right. Marrying Alex would have been my tragedy. But did that justify her stealing someone else's husband? I sneered sarcastically. This is the first time I've heard someone talk about being the other woman as if it's noble and virtuous. Selena blushed from my jab. Before she could retort, I questioned her further. Should I thank you, then? Thank you for humiliating me by crashing my wedding with Alex? Thank you for coming between Alex and me? Thank you for making me realize just how trashy Alex is and how unworthy he is of my lifelong trust. Thank you for being the homewrecker? She's not a homewrecker. Alex defended her immediately. I know you're having a hard time accepting our breakup, but I don't love you. Nothing you say will change my resolve to be with Selena. Alex, do you think I'm some pathetic person? I looked at him as if he were an idiot. What made you think I would have any lingering feelings for someone irresponsible, unfaithful, clueless, brainless, and tainted? Am I a garbage dump? Nicole, how did you become like this? Do you know how ugly you look right now? Alex was triggered by my words, growing furious. The more you act like this, the less I could ever like you again. Chapter 5. Then I should thank you for the blessing of not liking me, I said with a cold smile. You? Alex was left speechless. His face turned red. He probably never imagined, even in his dreams, that I could become this sharp and caustic. Selena tried to calm Alex down. Don't be mad. She's just saying these things in the heat of the moment. I believe she will forgive us eventually. Alex took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He said, Nicole, no matter what, I am truly grateful for your support back then. To repay you, I genuinely wanted to be with you and take care of you for life. The more I listened, the more ironic it felt. So what he meant was that being with me was out of obligation, because I helped him, and he had no way to repay me except by offering himself? He was being held hostage by a sense of morality. Nicole, but I've tried. I'm not happy being with you. I don't want our marriage to become a burden for us. You can have better, and I can be with my true love. Saying this, Alex looked tenderly at Selena. The two exchanged a sweet smile. Disgusting. Even my parents couldn't stand it anymore. Alex. Selena. You said you came here today to make amends for the harm you caused Nicole. In other words, this was not the place to flaunt their love. Here's a card. Alex took out a bank card. I did the math. Back when you supported me and paid for my grandmother's medical expenses, it totaled around 30,000 yuan. This card contains 3 million, a hundredfold return. You're not losing out. I looked indifferently at the bank card. Thankfully, I had no expectations left for Alex, so I wasn't too heartbroken. 3 million is quite a lot. But did he forget that it was because of me he could find work, start his company, and get to where he is now? Forget 3 million, even his current net worth of 30 million is all thanks to me. Sister, Alex has been more than generous to you. If it were anyone else, at most they'd return the money you gave, plus some interest, not more than 100,000. Selena egged him on. Since graduating college, you haven't worked a day, haven't earned a cent. All these years, Alex has been supporting you. You should be content. Is that what you told Selena about me? I asked Alex. Alex's eyes flickered, and he didn't answer directly, clearly indicating that it was true. He said, Nicole, I just hope we can part on good terms. After all, we're still family. Part on good terms? Back when Alex graduated and started his business, I was by his side from the ground up to help him secure projects. I drank until I had stomach bleeding, and I even got groped by some sleazy bigwigs. Alex knew all this well and had once been full of guilt. But in the end, it still turned into Selena's dismissive never earned a penny. I took the bank card. I saw Selena sneer in disdain. Alex also breathed a sigh of relief. After all, even if my family isn't poor, 3 million is not a small amount. They were convinced I wouldn't refuse. And I didn't disappoint them. I wish you both everlasting love. Thank you, sister, for giving us your blessing. Selena thanked me, but there wasn't much joy in her eyes. Just like every other time, she had stolen what was mine, and it always ended smoothly. She had long been accustomed to such outcomes. I didn't expect that in the next moment, I would slowly add, a slut with a dog, forever together. Chapter 6. Alex and Selena's faces turned pale from my words. Selena finally couldn't keep her composure, and she said righteously, Sister, you took the money, and now you're acting like this. Don't you think you're being a bit hypocritical? First of all, this money is what I deserve. I said each word clearly, making my point. Now, everything Alex has is thanks to me. No matter how much money he gives me, I deserve it. Second, you both cheated. And that is your fault, and it left a stain on my life. Getting compensation is only fair. Lastly, I wasted 10 years of my youth on a dog. Is 3 million too much? Selena was speechless. Alex didn't expect to be met with such resistance today. His face was cold as he said, No matter what, I don't want to argue anymore about who's right or wrong between us. When were you ever right? Fine. Let's say I was wrong. Alex couldn't argue with me and had to go along. But as things stand, I've done everything I can. If you don't forgive me, there's nothing I can do. The only thing I hope now is that you don't hate Selena. If you must hate someone, hate me. Don't worry. I won't punish myself for your mistakes. Hating you both would only be a waste of my life. I didn't waste any more time on them. Alex would get what he deserved sooner or later. As for Selena, being with Alex wouldn't end well either. Did she really think Alex was a good person? I ignored them and went back to my room. For me, what was more important now was developing my career. I would no longer be foolish enough to pave the way for someone else. In the days that followed, I focused solely on my work. Using the 3 million that Alex gave me, I started a digital media company, signing a lot of influencers and live stream hosts, opening a live shopping channel, and putting a lot of effort into new media like novels and short videos. The company grew rapidly. I was so busy that I only slept 5 or 6 hours a night, eating in short bursts, with no time at all to care about Alex or Selena. Until one day, a former partner of Alex's company, Nestor, called me because he couldn't reach Alex. He asked whether the collaboration, which was about to expire, would be renewed or not. He didn't know that Alex and I had gone our separate ways. That project had been secured by me, so he could only reach out to me. No renewal. I said, but I am willing to work with you. I told him about my split with Alex. Nestor readily agreed, saying that signing the contract with Alex was originally out of respect for me. Plus, Alex had been inconsistent with his work lately, hardly showing up at the company, and it was difficult to reach him when problems arose. Many partners were dissatisfied with him. Hearing this from Nestor, I felt no need to be polite. Previously, I hadn't touched Alex's clients, Not out of any humanitarian reason, but because taking over his clients would require resources. After my rebirth, I knew exactly which markets were more advantageous, so there was no need to waste energy. But now, business was being handed to me. There was no reason to refuse. Chapter 7. I started to gradually reach out to Alex's partners. Most of them decided to let their contracts with Alex expire and chose to work with me instead. And yet, throughout this whole time, Alex didn't seem to notice at all. In the past, that would have been impossible. The old Alex was a workaholic, though sometimes lacking negotiation skills. He was always serious and responsible at work. He would never have allowed his clients to be taken away. He was at least that vigilant. But of course, it's not surprising now. Whenever I had a rare moment of free time, I'd scroll through social media to relax, and I'd see Selena and Alex enjoying life, traveling all over. They were like a couple of wanderers living freely. Selena posted multiple updates every day, and Alex would like and comment on each one. Then Selena would reply again, back and forth. Their social media had become a place where they showed off their love without any restraint. Half a year passed by like that. And during this year's spring festival, Alex and Selena returned from traveling abroad, bringing back a lot of gifts for my parents. Selena also brought me a gift. She said, "Sister, I bought you this pink crystal bracelet. Specifically for you. It's said to attract romance and has been blessed. I heard from Mom and Dad that you've been alone these past 6 months, and Alex and I have been worried about you." No need to worry. I handed the pink crystal back to Selena. I just prefer quality over quantity. After all, meeting another dog would be too costly. Alex's face darkened. "I won't be having dinner here. I've got something to take care of." I said that as I headed to my room to change clothes. Watching them had completely killed my appetite. As soon as I stepped into my bedroom, I got a call from Luis. Luis was a high school classmate of mine who had just returned to the country not long ago. We met at a class reunion, and since we had some work collaborations, we stayed in touch. "Are you free tonight? During the new year, you're not having dinner at home?" I laughed. Too many relatives at home, all those aunts nagging me about marriage. I can't take it. "If you're free tonight, want to have dinner together?" "Sure." I happened to be looking for a dinner partner. Luis said he would be downstairs to pick me up in 10 minutes. I quickly changed my clothes and did my makeup as fast as possible. I hadn't worn makeup in a while, and it was New Year's, so I put a little extra effort into it. I walked into the living room and saw Alex and Selena cozying up together. They looked very sweet, but it was an eyesore. "Sister, are you dressed up so nicely to meet your boyfriend?" Selena asked deliberately. Alex also looked at me. "Who I meet, is it any of your business?" "I'm just concerned for you," Selena pouted, then deliberately said in front of my parents, "Mom, Dad, it's been so long. Why is my sister still like this? I've been trying to be so careful around her." My mom wasn't putting up with Selena's nonsense either. She had once pitied Selena, thinking the mistakes of the previous generation shouldn't be punished on the next. So, when Selena returned home, they didn't argue with her much. Plus Selena was always sweet-talking and playing the victim. But ever since she took Alex, my mom seemed to see Selena's true colors. She said bluntly, "You're being careful? Then why are you cozying up to Alex right in front of Nicole? You're being careful? Posting almost 100 updates on social media every day to show Nicole how in love you are with Alex?" Selena's face turned red from what my mom said. She stammered for quite a while before saying, "I thought my sister had already let it go. I'll be more mindful next time." "No need to be mindful. Post what you want," I said indifferently. "I'll just watch it like a joke." "What do you mean?" Selena asked, visibly annoyed. Exactly what I said. After all, the higher you jump, the more it hurts when you fall. I didn't waste more words on Selena and left. Luis was already waiting downstairs. When he saw me coming out, he immediately got out of the car and opened the door for me like a gentleman. As I got into the car, I almost felt like there were eyes watching me from above. I smiled coldly. It looked like there would soon be an interesting show. Chapter 8. After dinner with Luis, I came back at 10, carrying a bouquet of flowers. Usually, at this hour, Alex and Selena would have left already, but tonight they were still here. Seeing the bouquet of champagne roses I was holding, Selena's expression visibly changed. With the same expression she always had when she wanted to take what was mine, her eyes glowing, filled with excitement. "Sister, done with your date so early?" Selena asked me. I ignored her and began carefully placing the champagne roses into a vase. One by one. "I saw you earlier, leaving with a tall man. Is he your boyfriend?" Selena continued. "What? You're interested too?" I scoffed. "Do you just love taking whatever's mine?" Selena quickly replied. "I'm just worried about you. I'm with Alex now, and we're about to get married." "Well, congratulations to you both." After arranging the flowers, I returned to my room. I had just changed into my pajamas when I heard knocking at the door. Opening it, I saw Alex standing there. "Do you really have a boyfriend now?" Alex asked me. "Is it any of your business? I'm just worried you might get deceived." Alex said. "His name is Luis, right? I heard from friends you've been getting close lately." Considering how long Alex and I had been together, it wasn't surprising that we shared mutual friends, nor was it unusual that they exchanged news about us. "Yeah," I admitted bluntly. "We even had a candlelit dinner tonight. You know he has a girlfriend abroad, right?" Alex said, visibly agitated. "So what?" I replied calmly. "I said he has a girlfriend. He's got a girlfriend and he's still seeing you. What does he take you for?" Alex was furious at my indifferent response and started to lash out. Before I could respond, he continued his rant. "Nicole, what do you think you're doing? Since we broke up, are you just going to throw yourself away like this? There are good men everywhere, it's not just me. Why are you doing this to yourself? Are you trying to make me feel guilty?" Ha! I couldn't help but laugh. I laughed out loud. "What are you laughing at?" Alex was still fuming. "I'm laughing at how shameless some people can be. Stop pretending. Nicole, I know you still have feelings for me. If you didn't, why haven't you dated anyone else all this time? Why are you with someone who has a girlfriend? You're just doing it to get back at me." Alex said with utter confidence. "So you agree that being with a man who already has a girlfriend is disgraceful, right?" I didn't want to argue anymore. It was pointless. A man like Alex, so self-absorbed, so convinced of his own worth, would never see himself as anything less. A pathetic sense of pride forced him to be extremely arrogant. "Utterly disgraceful," Alex stated firmly. "What about Selena?" I smiled as I asked him. Alex froze, clearly not expecting such a sarcastic remark from me. "My situation with Selena is different." "How is it different?" I laughed even harder. "Weren't you in a relationship with me when you got involved with her? So how come, in your case, you and Selena were pursuing true love, but my relationship with Luis is something shameful? Do I need to have an affair at a wedding to call it a praiseworthy love?" "You..." Alex's face turned red from my words. He gritted his teeth. "Nicole, I'm only trying to protect you. I know Luis is just playing with you. As soon as the new year is over, he's going abroad. Do you really think there's a future between you two? How would I know without trying? Who's to say he won't give up his plans to leave the country? Give up his girlfriend, just to be with me? If Selena can do it, why can't I?" I deliberately provoked Alex, and I said it loudly enough for Selena to hear from outside the door. She'd been eavesdropping for a while now, but I acted like I hadn't noticed. Alex, standing with his back to the door, certainly hadn't realized either. Chapter 9. You're just trying to prove you're more attractive than Selena. To put it bluntly, you're bitter because she took me away from you. Alex remained as confident as ever. I said nothing, just stared at Alex. "Why are you staring at me like that? Do I have something on my face?" Alex frowned. "Yeah," I nodded. "What is it?" Alex quickly began touching his face in a panic. A little bit of disgust. "Nicole," Alex shouted, furious. "Since you're so shameless, there's no point in sparing your fragile ego anymore." I spoke bluntly, my words piercing straight through his pride. "Luis comes from a prestigious family. His father is a business tycoon. His mother is a university professor. Everyone around him is wealthy and well-connected. You're just some small-town overachiever. You're not even close to being on the same level. He graduated from a top international university, is tall, handsome, witty, and charming. Most importantly, He isn't burdened by insecurity or arrogance. His relaxed attitude toward life is something you'll never be able to achieve in your lifetime. With someone as exceptional as him, how could you possibly think I would still be hung up on you? Do you think I've completely lost my mind or that I've taken a blow to the head? I watched as Alex's face turned green with anger from my words. Don't ever show up in front of me again, I said, enunciating every word. You're too much of an eyesore. Nicole, remember what you said. You better not regret it. Alex was furious. He threw out his words and stormed off. At the door, he clearly saw Selena, but he didn't stop for a second. Selena glanced at me, as if she had something to say, but in the end, she bit her lip and chased after Alex. After that, Selena started coming home more frequently. She stopped following Alex around on his travels and instead subtly tried to gather information about me from my parents. Eventually, she found out that my relationship with Luis was getting closer. On my birthday, I deliberately called my mom and told her that I was going to have dinner with Luis outside and wouldn't be coming home. I even gave her the place and time of our dinner. Sure enough, at 6:30 in the evening, we coincidentally ran into Alex and Selena at the restaurant. They were arm in arm. So were Luis and I. I saw Alex's gaze fixate on my arm wrapped around Luis's. Selena, too. But Selena's gaze lingered more on Luis, sizing him up from head to toe, her eyes glowing with interest. Sis, what a coincidence. Want to join us for dinner? Selena greeted us proactively. Not interested. I rejected her outright and then pulled Luis toward the table I had reserved. During dinner, I could feel Alex and Selena's eyes on us from time to time, but I ignored them. Halfway through the meal, Luis gave me a surprise. He sat at the elegant restaurant's piano and played a beautiful melody to celebrate my birthday, attracting everyone's attention. He also gave me flowers and an expensive piece of jewelry in front of everyone, making many girls envious, including Selena. I watched the predatory look in Selena's eyes, barely concealing her desire. So when Luis got up to go to the restroom, Selena followed him. As soon as Selena left, Alex immediately headed toward me. Chapter 10. Nicole, are you serious? Are you really going to be Luis's mistress? Alex said with a face full of disdain. Don't make it sound so ugly, I replied calmly. Luis and I are in true love. You're really not the Nicole I used to know anymore. Does it matter if I'm the Nicole you knew? I said indifferently. To me, you're just someone insignificant. Do you think I still care about what you think of me? Nicole, I already told you. Don't show up in front of me, it's an eyesore. With that, I stood up and headed straight to the restroom. Alex followed after me, and then we both saw it, in the hallway near the restroom. Selena was leaning into Luis's arms. Thank you, Luis. If not for you, I would have fallen on the floor, Selena said, appearing flustered. Though anyone could see she was pressing her body closer into Luis's embrace. I noticed Alex's face turn dark, probably because this scene felt all too familiar. This was exactly how Selena seduced Alex back then, wasn't it? Luis straightened her up. Selena pretended to twist her ankle again, and once more fell into Luis's arms, tightly hugging his body and letting out a delicate cry. Aw, it hurts. What happened? Luis asked, concerned. It seems I twisted my ankle. I can't walk. Do you need me to take a look? Luis asked. Wouldn't that be too much trouble? And if my sister sees us? What if she misunderstands? Are you really afraid of being misunderstood? Luis leaned closer to Selena's ear, speaking flirtatiously. Isn't the whole point of this to seduce me? No, I'm not. But even as she denied it, she pressed herself closer against Luis. Luis took advantage of the situation and held her, asking, Didn't your sister say you were getting married? And you're still acting like this? Who said I'm getting married? There's no way I'd marry Alex. Selena buried herself in Luis's arms. I don't like him at all. He's just a climber. Totally unworthy of me. I haven't brought up breaking up because I was worried he wouldn't take it well. Really? But I heard you took Alex from your sister at her wedding. Luis teased. And now you're already moving on? Or maybe you just like your sister's men? She doesn't want them anymore. And neither do you? No way. Selena denied it. I just genuinely like you. Be honest with me. Do you just like your sister's men? Luis lifted Selena's chin. Anyway, I'm just playing around with your sister. But I like honest women. Selena seemed desperate to snatch Luis away from me. So she admitted, yes. Ever since I was young, I loved taking her things. Why is it that when I had nothing, she got to enjoy everything from our family as if it was all hers by right? I was jealous. So I swore, anything that belonged to my sister, I would take, including her men. Selena, are you with me just because I'm your sister's boyfriend, and not because you like me? Alex could no longer stay silent, shouting at them in anger. Chapter 11. Selena was startled. She hadn't expected Alex and I to be there. She quickly stammered, and no, it's not what you think. I was just helping my sister test Luis, to see if he truly loves her. That's not true. Luis exposed her. The way you were leaning into me just now, trying to press your entire body against mine, rubbing against me, it was almost like you were about to strip on the spot. I didn't. Luis said nothing more and walked away from Selena, heading toward me. Old classmate. How did the mission go? I smiled and nodded. I'll apologize to your girlfriend later for getting her boyfriend's body tainted. No need. She despises pretentious coquettes the most. She actually supports me helping you. I'll have to treat her to dinner abroad someday. Deal. Luis and I walked away together. Behind us, I seemed to hear Alex's furious screams. Selena, I'm going to kill you. Do you know how much I sacrificed for you? How could you do this to me? Selena also screamed. Alex, let go of me. You lunatic. You deserve to be seduced by me. Blame your own stupidity. Now that everything's out in the open, I'm done playing with you. We're breaking up. Anything Nicole doesn't want. I feel disgusted just looking at it. Let go of me. I didn't turn back to watch the spectacle. A dog-eat-dog fight, what's there to see? But I had to admit, there was a certain satisfaction in this revenge. Later, I heard that Alex and Selena ended up at the police station that day. They both were bruised, in a very undignified state. And after that, I also heard that Alex's company faced major problems. He was deep in debt, on the verge of bankruptcy. Of course, none of this matters to me. Alex is just an outsider. As for Selena, because she repeatedly tried to seduce my boyfriend, my parents finally had enough of her and disowned her, kicking her out of the family. I thought I would never have anything to do with these two again, but I didn't expect Alex to have the nerve to come see me. He waited for me at the company entrance after work. After months without seeing him, Alex looked noticeably thinner, the whole of him appearing quite disheveled. Of course, I knew about his current predicament. If he couldn't secure another loan, his company would go bankrupt. He said, Nicole, I was wrong. I never thought Selena would turn out to be like this. I looked at him indifferently, my lips curling in a mocking smile, as if watching a joke. He continued sorrowfully, Selena deceived me, and I deeply regret it. Now I realize that the person I love is you. Can we start over? I swear, I will never betray you again. If I do, I'll break both of my legs. I sneered. Didn't you say you'd break both of your legs the last time you betrayed me? How are they still there? What are you, a centipede or a crab, with so many legs? Alex was visibly embarrassed by my words. Stop acting. I'm not going to guarantee your loan with the bank. I laid it all out clearly. Wasting even a second on him was a waste of my life. I'm not here to ask for a loan guarantee. I really realized that you're the one I love. When you were with Luis, I was jealous. I just didn't dare admit it. Afraid you'd laugh at me. And you're not afraid now? I'm more afraid of losing you than being laughed at. Ugh, I couldn't help but retch. This is truly disgusting. Alex's face turned pale, his eyes reddening as he asked me, Nicole, can you really not forgive me? Didn't you and Luis put on that show to expose Selena so I could see her true colors? So we could get back together like before? I couldn't help but laugh again. Without further words, I said bluntly, Alex, you're not the only one who has been reborn. Chapter 12. Alex was stunned. In our previous life, when you killed yourself for Selena, did you ever think about me? Who was still pregnant? I said coldly, what reason do I have to forgive you, let alone love you again? Everything I've done was for revenge, for myself. And for my unborn child, Nicole. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Alex panicked, trying helplessly to grab me. I avoided him. He kept saying, "It was my fault. Terribly wrong of me. How could I abandon you and our child for a woman like that?" Nicole. Listening to him just annoyed me, so I called over security. "Get him out of here, and don't let him step foot in this place again." Nicole. Even as the security guards dragged him away, Alex's eyes were fixed on me, filled with regret. To me, it was nothing but laughable. Why regret it now? I left indifferently, and after that, I never let Alex see me again. He called me, and I blocked his number. I didn't answer any calls from unknown numbers. He waited for me at the company and outside my apartment building, but I had security drive him away each time. I even reported him to the police, completely putting an end to Alex trying to find me. Just when I had forgotten about these people, Selena suddenly showed up. She shamelessly demanded money from me, threatening to expose how we had kicked her out of the family, saying she would ruin my and my family's reputation. I simply sent her the video of her seducing Luis. I knew she'd come to this once she had nowhere else to go. Selena lost it. When I was driving home from work, she drove her car straight at me without hesitation. And at that moment, a car came speeding from the side and crashed into Selena's car, sending it flying. The two cars were completely wrecked right in front of me. I got out of my car, still shaken. I saw Selena's car. Its front end was completely deformed, and she was trapped inside, bloodied and lifeless. The other car wasn't in much better shape. Alex was inside, covered in blood, but his eyes were still open, as if he was using every bit of his strength to see me clearly. I saw his lips move, as if he was saying, "I'm sorry." It was useless. I shook my head, refusing his apology, even in death. Alex was just atoning for our lost child. I would never forgive him for what he had done. Soon, the police arrived at the scene. Selena was pronounced dead on the spot. Alex, after emergency treatment, became a vegetative state, forever confined to a bed. I never went to see him in the hospital, because Alex no longer existed in my world. After all, my life had long since begun anew.